Hospitals are places of healing where lives are saved and families find hope. For years, Dr. Michael Grant was seen as a beacon of that hope. He was a senior physician at Ridgeway Medical Center, known for his calm demeanor and quick decision-making. Patients and staff alike respected him. He had the power to change lives, and for a long time it seemed like he used it for good. But behind closed doors, there were whispers. Nurses and junior doctors noticed something unusual. Dr. Grant had a reputation for pushing patients toward early end-of-life care, even when there were other options. At first, they thought it was pragmatism. He was a doctor working in a strained healthcare system, after all. But as the years passed, the pattern became harder to ignore. Families trusted Dr. Grant's judgment. When he told them their loved ones wouldn't recover, they believed him. He spoke with authority and compassion, guiding them toward what he called a dignified end. But for some, that end came faster than anyone could have anticipated. It was a case that began quietly, almost unnoticed. A woman named Susan had brought her father, Henry, to Ridgeway Medical Center after he suffered a minor stroke. Dr. Grant assured Susan that her father's condition was manageable. But within a week, Henry's health had taken a sharp turn for the worse. He was placed on palliative care and passed away shortly after. The family was heartbroken, but didn't question the doctor's decisions until another patient's story reached their ears. Another family, the Thompsons, had experienced a similar situation. Their mother, who had also been admitted for a treatable condition, had deteriorated under Dr. Grant's care. Like Henry, she had been placed on palliative care and passed away quickly. The similarities were too striking to ignore. Before we go any further, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like these deserve to be told, and your support helps us uncover the truth behind these chilling betrayals. The families began to compare notes. They discovered that Dr. Grant had not only treated their loved ones, but had also been the one to recommend withdrawing life support. Their suspicions grew, but without concrete proof, they had nowhere to turn. That is, until a whistleblower stepped forward. The whistleblower was a nurse who had worked under Dr. Michael Grant for years. Her name was Linda, and she had always respected Dr. Grant, trusting his experience and his calm approach to even the most difficult cases. But over time, she noticed patterns that didn't add up. Patients who arrived with manageable conditions were suddenly deemed terminal. Families were quickly persuaded to consent to end-of-life care, and Dr. Grant always seemed to have the final say. At first, Linda convinced herself that it was just a coincidence, that Dr. Grant knew things she didn't. But one night, while reviewing patient charts, she noticed a troubling detail. Many of the patients who passed away under Dr. Grant's care had received unusually high doses of medication just before their deaths. The doses weren't enough to raise immediate suspicion, but they were far higher than what was typically recommended for comfort care. Linda couldn't shake her unease. She began keeping a private record of these cases, noting the medication dosages and the patient's conditions. Her findings were alarming. Over the past 5 years, at least 17 patients had followed the same trajectory, treatable conditions that worsened unexpectedly, followed by high doses of medication and rapid decline. When Linda finally spoke up, her concerns were met with resistance. The hospital administrators were hesitant to question someone of Dr. Grant's stature. After all, he was one of their most senior physicians, and his reputation brought prestige to the hospital. But Linda's persistence paid off when she brought her findings to an independent investigator. The investigation uncovered a pattern of decision-making that seemed almost mechanical. Dr. Grant had recommended palliative care for a disproportionate number of his patients, many of whom had good chances of recovery. When questioned, Dr. Grant defended his actions, claiming that he was acting in the best interest of the patients and their families. He argued that prolonged treatments would have caused unnecessary suffering and financial strain. But then came the shocking revelation. The hospital had a financial incentive to minimize the cost of long-term care. Dr. Grant's decisions had saved the hospital millions of dollars by freeing up beds and reducing expenses. Investigators began to wonder, had Dr. Grant been motivated by something other than patient care? Was he prioritizing hospital profits over human lives? Before we reveal the chilling truth, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us bring these stories to light and hold those in power accountable. As the investigation deepened, families of the deceased came forward with their own stories. One mother tearfully recounted how Dr. Grant had convinced her to withdraw care for her teenage son after a car accident, claiming he would never recover. But another doctor later reviewed the case and concluded that the boy could have survived with proper treatment. The evidence against Dr. Grant continued to mount. Investigators found emails between Dr. Grant and hospital administrators discussing cost-saving measures. While the language was careful, it was clear that reducing expenses was a priority, but the most damning piece of evidence was yet to come. A nurse's account of witnessing Dr. Grant administering an excessive dose of morphine to a patient who wasn't in severe pain. The public was outraged as these revelations came to light. How could a trusted doctor betray the very people he was supposed to protect? And how had the hospital allowed it to go on for so long? As the investigation reached its conclusion, the full scope of Dr. Michael Grant's actions was laid bare. Evidence showed that he had repeatedly overridden standard medical protocols, administering high doses of painkillers and sedatives to patients who didn't need them. These medications, while not immediately lethal, hastened death for individuals who might have otherwise survived. The justification? Cost-saving measures that aligned with the hospital's financial goals. But why would someone like Dr. Grant, a man sworn to save lives, make such horrifying choices? In court, the prosecution argued that Dr. Grant had become desensitized to the sanctity of life. He saw patients not as people, but as numbers on a spreadsheet. Each early death meant fewer expenses for the hospital and more accolades for his efficiency. Dr. Grant's defense painted a different picture. His lawyers claimed he had always acted with the best intentions, sparing families from prolonged suffering and avoiding unnecessary treatments. They argued that the healthcare system itself was to blame, with its pressure to cut costs and its focus on metrics over compassion. But these arguments rang hollow in the face of overwhelming evidence. The final blow came when a former hospital administrator testified against Dr. Grant. The administrator revealed that Dr. Grant had been rewarded with bonuses tied to the hospital's financial performance. While not explicitly tied to patient outcomes, these bonuses created a clear conflict of interest. Dr. Grant's financial gain came at the expense of human lives. Families of the victims filled the courtroom during the trial, their faces etched with grief. One by one they shared their stories, describing the pain of losing loved ones and the betrayal they felt when they learned the truth. "He didn't just take my father's life," one woman said. "He stole our trust. He made us believe he cared." Dr. Grant was ultimately found guilty of multiple charges, including manslaughter and medical malpractice. He was sentenced to life in prison, a punishment many felt still fell short of the devastation he had caused. The hospital faced its own reckoning, with lawsuits and public outrage forcing it to overhaul its policies and leadership. But even as justice was served, questions remained. How many other hospitals had similar practices? How many other doctors were making decisions influenced by money instead of medicine? The case of Dr. Michael Grant became a wake-up call, shining a light on the dangerous intersection of healthcare and profit. If this story has shocked you as much as it has us, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. These are the stories that need to be heard, the truths that demand to be told. As we reflect on the lives lost and the trust betrayed, one thing is clear. Those who are entrusted with the power to save lives must be held to the highest standard. Betrayals like this cannot be forgotten, and justice must always be pursued. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the system or the individual was more to blame? Don't forget to follow us and turn on the notification bell to stay updated on stories of betrayal, justice, and the pursuit of truth. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep questioning.